Our history starts with a bank founded during the Second World War. A bank with an eventful destiny that has prioritized the development of countries in the South and the French overseas territories. Our history is the history of
Hey, this video does contain some basic level of 3D. Don't stress, I already made a video covering all the basics, so give that a watch if you're unfamiliar with anything regarding 3D in this video. Okay, so in the description there is a link to an assets folder which contains all of the assets I used when making this. So go ahead and download that and follow along, and welcome to the third episode of Mograph Monday. Okay, so opening a new timeline here, drag in the file that says audio and just place that into your timeline. It literally just contains the audio that we're going to need. I'm just going to delete this section here. I'm going to bring in a fusion composition and just drag that to the length of the audio here. And yeah, there we go. Okay, so inside of the Fusion page here, we're going to set up our assets and build out our scene before we start animating. And the animation itself is pretty simple. It's just a linear movement of the camera swiping from right to left. I'm going to bring in the map and I'm just going to put this inside of the first screen here. Okay, so we want to get this as close as we can to the original. So we got to remove some of the colors here and make just the French colonies here stand out a little bit more. To do that, we're going to use a hue curves and a color corrector. So right clicking hue curves here and then color corrector. And then I'm just going to view the output here so we can see the difference. Okay, in our hue curves, we're just going to select all of these here and just bring them down all the way to the bottom here. And then zooming out of the graph, I'm just going to bring the reds down just a tiny bit as well. Something like that will do. Okay, now for the color correctors, I'm just going to change the slider so it just nudges into the yellow ever so slightly. As you can see, if I go to the extreme, it changes quite a bit. I want it to be ever so slightly. Something like that will do. And we'll maybe tweak this as we go along as well. So let's go ahead and isolate the French colonies. I'm just going to use the multi-poly, which is a feature in DaVinci Resolve 19. It basically just allows me to have multi-polygons in just one node. If you don't have this, it's perfectly fine to go ahead and use just the regular polygon node, the one in Africa here. So yeah, just go along and select all of the ones isolated here. Okay, so once we have all of our masks here, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate our media and apply the mask to the duplication. So we just have them selected like so. And then I'm just going to change the saturation all the way down so it's black and white. Okay, I'm going to add in a background node like so. And I'm just going to merge this to the brightness and contrast. And then I'm going to pipe this into the mask of the merge. So when we view, it turns into black. Let's just change the color to be sort of a turquoisey color. Something like that will do. We can tweak that later. Going to the merge here, I'm going to change the apply mode to be color, which then we get this. And then I'm going to go ahead and drag this and merge this on top. And then I'm just going to view the merge. So then we have all the colonies isolated. I'm going to go ahead and change the color. Yeah, that looks a little better. All right, I'm just going to make this a little neater. So in the original as well, the edge of the map is feathered by quite a lot. So we're going to go into the original here. Just drag in a rectangle node like so. And then I'm just going to soften the edge by quite a bit. And then I'm also just going to decrease the border width as well. I think something like that will do as well. I'm just going to turn on the color channel here so you can see where the edge of our mask is. And we can go ahead and tweak this later on as well. And lastly here, I'm just going to go ahead now and merge this onto a background. So our timeline is now 1920 by 1080 and of course decreasing the alpha like so. Okay, so looking at the original here, we can see that there are a bunch of assets and things added onto the map to make it look more interesting. We're actually going to start off here by adding the lines that extend out of the map to give it more of an interesting image. And then we're going to go ahead and focus on this middle point here. Okay, so first we're going to go ahead and add a transform. Hovering over the viewer here, I'm just going to turn on the grid by hitting Ctrl G. And we can tell that the map isn't 100% straight. So we're going to go ahead and just tweak that. I'm going to view the transform here and just make sure it's leveled just ever so slightly here using the center point as a reference. Okay, once that is done, I'm going to go ahead and add a background here because we're going to use that to make our lines. I'm going to turn off this second viewer here and just view our main viewer. All right, so going inside of the background here, zooming all the way in, I'm just going to select it so it's the same color as the line here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and split my viewer again. Okay, so still viewing this merge here, I'm going to go ahead and use the multi-polygon here. And I'm just going to go ahead and trace out where I want the lines to be. I'm going to do 3 of them over here on the right. I'm going to place a line here and then place another line here. And I'm just going to make it as straight as I possibly can using the reference here. Something like that will do. Okay, adding that onto our background here and then just viewing the polygon. I'm going to go ahead and increase the border width like so. so you can actually see that the line is being added on. Decreasing the line, I'm actually going to go ahead and make this a little bit darker. I think that will do. Holding shift and dragging across here, longer here, and I can see that it's not straight, so I'm just going to go ahead and straighten that out. I'm just going to go ahead and right click and hit duplicate here, clicking this mouse pointer here. I'm just going to go ahead and drag it and move it down so we get our second line, and I'm going to go ahead and do that one more time so we get our nice lines here, and we can go ahead and extend this and shorten this as we move along. Again, like before, if you're using an older version of Resolve, just go ahead and do this, but with the normal polygon node. I'm going to go ahead now and repeat this, but for the second one here, I'm going to use another background just to be a little more organized. You can just use the same poly if you really don't care about all that stuff. This time we're going to go over and do this to the left hand side. I'm going to start off by placing a pointer here and using the guideline. I'm just going to go ahead and drag across. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the width and then view that, so then we can see that the line is right there. Go ahead and duplicate this, selecting and then bringing this one down to this bottom line here, and then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that and bringing it all the way down to this bottom line here. And yeah, I think that looks good so far. Okay, I'm actually going to go ahead and add one more, but this time make it vertical, and it's ever so slightly, you can see the faint line here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add another polygon, and I'm just gonna use this one for reference, clicking this line, dragging down to somewhere like here, pasting the border width, and then selecting this pointer here, and then just dragging it across, holding shift. So we have nice and straight line. I'm gonna go ahead and tweak this as well by just making this bigger. And yeah, I think that looks good so far. Okay, lastly, with these lines here, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste one more, and we're going to add them to the top of our screen here. Just like before, we're going to place a line here, go down, and use the line here as reference, and then dragging this up. I'm going to repeat this for every 2 lines over. So this one here, and then once more for this one. Okay, so now that's done, we're going to composite it a little bit more by adding texture onto those lines. And we're going to do that by using a fast noise. We'll go ahead and drag in a fast noise like so, splitting our viewer here and viewing this fast noise. Firstly, we're going to go over into color and select gradient. As the black is selected, I'm going to go ahead and pull down the alpha all the way, and I'm just going to drag these 2 pointers closer together. Something like that will do. Then going back into noise, we're going to go ahead and increase the detail all the way up to 10. And then I'm going to increase the size to 1000. So we get this noise texture here. We're going to go ahead now and pipe that into the mask input of these lines. So when we zoom in all the way, it's added texture onto the lines, almost looking like it's been drawn on with a pencil on a piece of paper or something along those lines. All right, we're off to a great start. Okay, so time to focus onto the text. We're going to pull in our text node here. I'm just going to view this text node, and we're going to use Open Sans, and I'm just going to go ahead and type in French overseas colonies. Okay, so once that is typed out like so, we're going to go and try and make it as close as we can to the original. So we're going to go over into transform. We're going to go over into size. It alters the size of each individual character. We're going to decrease the value of this X scale here, and then we're going to increase the value of the Y scale like so. And then going over into spacing, I'm going to decrease the value so it brings them all closer together. I think something like that will do. So bringing in a background here, we're going to go ahead and make the lines underneath and over the text. So go ahead and merge this onto the background, viewing the background, and then adding a rectangle mask and just piping that into the background. We're going to go ahead and pinch this all the way down and then extend it like so. Okay, something like that works. We can go ahead and tweak this later on as well, but we're going to go over and move into adding the texture. We're going to use the exact same technique as before by adding in a fast noise and piping that into the mask so it gives it that nice texture. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this fast noise, and we're going to change the settings. I'm actually going to go ahead and move this across, and I'm going to pipe this into the mask input. So as you can see, it's immediately added that texture that we used. We're going to go ahead and change the settings so the texture is a little bit different. Firstly, we're going to decrease this to something like 40. We're going to increase the brightness to 0.41. We're going to increase the contrast to 2.27, and then we're going to decrease the detail to something like here. I think that looks pretty good. And now we can go ahead and play around with the size. I'm just going to decrease this and make it a lot thinner like so. So zooming in all the way with the texture, we can see that the texture is the exact same one as the one above. We can tell by the lines here being the same. So to get it as close as we can to the original, we're going to go ahead and just duplicate the line and add it above. So in our timeline here, we're going to go ahead and hit Shift Space and type in duplicate, and then going ahead and dragging that duplicate above. So we can see the texture is the exact same as the one above. Okay, so they're all different colors. This one is black and then this one is white. We're going to go ahead and fix this by adding in another background and just piping that into the background to change it to one color. I'm going to go ahead and paste in this hex code that I used earlier to give it this. Let's go ahead and copy this hex code and you get this color. Okay, to be organized here, I'm just going to go ahead and make this like so, and then group these and add this into our main timeline, adding a transform. And then I'm just going to go ahead and scale this down like so. Something like that looks good to me. I'm actually going to go ahead now and tweak how close they are together. And I'm going to go ahead and just extend the width. Okay, that looks good to me. Just to make this look a little bit better, we're going to go ahead and go over into the merge and change the apply mode to multiply. So it go ahead and darkens the image, and when you zoom in closely, we can still see the map underneath our text here. Okay, so once this is done, we're going to go ahead and make those blue lines that appear on top of this image. To do that, we're going to bring in a background, pipe that into the main, then selecting the background, I'm going to add a rectangle. I'm just going to go ahead and view this. I'm going to uncheck solid and just increase the border width so we get a nice rectangle like so. Just going to go ahead and place this over our French territories text that we made earlier. Something like this will do. And then I'm just going to increase the size like so. I'm going to go ahead and add another rectangle and just change the merge to subtract. So as we can see, it takes away from our image. We want to take away just the bottom line here, so because we don't need to see this. Okay, so once we are happy with our selection, we can go ahead and just hit invert. And now we just see just the two lines like that. Again, to make it as close as we can to the original, we can see that yes, we've made our two lines here. We don't need to worry about that. We can go ahead and make the horizontal ones. And looking closer, we can see that this one here is a full line, but this one isn't the same length here. So we're just going to go ahead and replicate that inside of our actual comp. Okay, so going back inside of our comp here, I'm actually just going to remove this from the main timeline and just view this like so. I'm going to copy this background and just merge this one on top like so, and then bring the merges and the background like this. I'm going to go ahead and copy this and make an instance of it like so, and I'm just going to view this instance. Selecting the instance here, I'm going to go ahead and de-instance the height and the width by just clicking and going over it into de-instance, and you can tell it's de-instance because this is now deselected. And I'm going to do the same for the height here. And lastly, for the angle. So then when we view both of them, and I go ahead and just change the angle to 90 degrees and just reshape this line like so. And I'm actually going to go ahead and add a polygon node here, and I'm just going to mask out where I want the lines to be cut off. Something like this will do. And then I'm just going to go ahead and make this subtract and invert those lines like so. And then I'm going to go ahead and increase, so we get something that looks pretty close to the original. And then now when we go ahead and increase or decrease the border width, we can see that all of our lines selected, and we don't have to go in one by one and deselect or select those lines. Okay, piping this back into our main, I'm actually going to go ahead now and delete this background and make an instance of it like so, and then piping this in. So now we don't have to go ahead and change the colors as well. You can just select any of the backgrounds. So selecting the instance here, I'm actually going to go ahead and use this hex code, copy and paste this hex code in, and we get the color like so. I'm just going to go ahead now and tweak this. And then one last thing I actually forgot to mention is going into the instance and deselecting the center and just de-instancing it like that. So then now we can move them freely. Okay, I'm going to bring this one up like so and change the cutoff. We're going to go ahead and actually go into the instance and decrease the level so it's kind of see-through as well. Something like that. I think looks good to me so far. Okay, so referring back to the original again, we're going to go ahead and make these circles that outline where exactly the French colonies are. And off the bat, I can tell that they have an interesting texture to them, which we can go ahead and add as well. Okay, so before I do that, I'm actually going to go ahead and tweak this here. Deselect the triangle as well, so it's not animated as well. And I'm just going to move this along like so. I'm just going to make this straight. Whilst we're at it, I'm just going to pipe this into the media out for now, so we just don't have to keep viewing the merges. Okay, so we're going to add in another background and pipe that in, and then add in an ellipse. Inside of our ellipse here, we're going to uncheck solid and increase our border width like so. We can go ahead and tweak that later on. Going over into our effects tab here, I'm going to go ahead and just type in paper, and then going over into templates and bringing in over the paper edge. And we're going to add that like so. So as you can tell, it's added quite a bit of texture. First off, what we don't want is the shadow. So go ahead and just decrease the alpha. I'm just going to deselect this. I'm going to go ahead into the edge roughness and pull that to something like 5. Going over into the edge contract, just increase that value ever so slightly as well. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and increase the border a little bit as well. Okay, something like this looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more texture to this as well. So pulling in the fast noise we made earlier, I'm going ahead and pasting this in and piping this into the mask input like so. Like before, we're going to go ahead and change this to our desired look. So selecting fast noise, going over into color, I'm just going to go ahead and tighten these triangles together. Something like that will look good. Going back into noise, I'm going to decrease the detail to 3.78. I'm going to decrease the size to 4.88. And then I'm just going to go ahead and increase the brightness. And then you can play around with the sheath here to get your desired look. I'm just going to keep it normal for now. And then I'm going to bring in a transform and scale this down like so. So in the original, the circle isn't closed all the way. So going over into length here, I'm going to go ahead and decrease that value. And then playing around with the position, I'm going to have it angled where I want it to be. And then I'm just going to go ahead now and increase the size of our length here. It's a little bit too thick for me. So I'm going to go ahead and actually decrease our border width till we get something that looks like this. Again, if you're not happy with the fast noise, I'm going to go ahead and just change the sheath rate. I think something like that looks good to me. I'm actually going to go ahead back into the paper edge and increase the border as well, and then decreasing the border width so we get a more textured look. Again, we're going to have the exact same color as we did for our other texture that we did. And then I'm just going to go ahead and paste that hex code in like so. Again, change the mask over into multiply. And then I'm just going to go ahead and just group these three like so. So we just get a neater timeline. And then go ahead and repeat those for all of the colonies that we highlighted. So once that's done, I did go ahead and animate all of the ellipses as well, starting off over here in this keyframe. And then they just go ahead and write on like so, with the graph looking like this. Okay, so once we have our main thing prepped here, I'm going to go ahead now, and because I still have the tab open, I'm going to go ahead and bring in the paper texture that's already made for us here. I think this version, I might be wrong, be only available in the 19, 18, and maybe 17, I'm not sure. But once we have this paper texture already pre-made for us, it's looking pretty good. We're going to go ahead now and merge this behind our assets here. So by just deselecting and then merging this one on top and dragging this over, you can see our paper texture has been added. So we're going to go ahead and tweak the colors around. Okay, so opening this up and going over into the brightness and contrast, we're going to go ahead and increase the saturation, something like 0.107 will do. And then the contrast 0.13 till we get something like that. Okay, so going back inside of the hue curves here, I went ahead and changed the graph just a tiny bit. Going over into the color contractor here, I went ahead and decreased the scale like so, and I went and also changed the hue. So go ahead and just copy all these elements here, and your image should look something like this. Okay, going all the way back to the front here, I'm just going to go ahead and bring this up. And we're going to use this section here to help composite it a little bit more. We're going to bring in a background and then add an ellipse. We're going to go ahead and invert, soften the edge, and then bring down the value of the level here. I'm going to soften that a lot more so that we get something that looks like this. And we can go ahead and just tweak this along as we go, but this is a great start. We're going to go ahead now and work on the writing that appears right in the beginning of our animation. Okay. To explain this, I basically went ahead and I brought in a text node here and I changed the size as well as the font. I'll leave a link in the description to download the same font that I used as well. Going over into the shader here, I just went ahead and enabled the red line just to make it pop out a little bit more. Going back into this one here, then I piped that into a background and made it black. I'll just copy and paste this to show you as well. And then to have the write-on effect, I went and pulled in a polygon node here. Without it being piped in, I went in and just copied the line positioning with the polygon node here of our letters. Okay, so just to demonstrate, I'm just gonna use the first word here, but you can go ahead and do this with all of the letters. Okay, so once you've gone ahead and you've made your selection here, piping this into our text, you can see it disappears. But then if I go ahead and increase the border width like so, and then I go ahead and play with the length, you can see that it is animated onto the text here. Go ahead and do the same thing. If I just copy and paste this over here for all of the text, and just go ahead and animate them with these keyframes here. It's just a linear movement, so no tweaking the graph at all. Okay, and then once you've done that, I went ahead and I did the exact same thing, but with the dots and the crosses. I'll just demonstrate here that you can see the dots of the I here and then the crosses of the T. So then when we pipe that all together and animate them, we get this nice write-on effect. I'm not sure if this is an easier or a quicker way to do this, but this is the way I did it. And I'll just show you quickly here with the dots and the crosses. If I just go ahead and deselect this, I did add an extra one here, keyframer, for the level. So right before it appears here, I just went ahead and placed the level at 0 and then this at 1. If I just go ahead and take away that keyframe or increase the level, you can see that when I scrub all the way to the beginning of the timeline, that dot is still there. So just to clean it up a bit, I did go ahead and make this 0. So everything together just gives it a nicer feel. So once that is done, I'm going to go ahead and add a posterized time, add that into our timeline. Now, I'll leave a link to Vision's video where you can go ahead and download this. It basically does the exact same thing as the stop motion, but you can be more specific with the amount of, so I'm going to go something like 17. So it just brings down the frame of everything. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and deselect this now for playback. And we're actually not going to go ahead and add this into our comp because we're going to transfer everything now into 3D layers. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now and just deselect this. I'm going to bring this bit over here, and then I'm just going to make our 3D environment. And then I'm going to go ahead and just merge this like so. And then I'm going to add this, open our second viewer and pull this in. We still have our grid line here, so I'm just going to go ahead and deselect that. So for our image plane, I did go ahead and tweak the position with the transform inside of the image plane here, and I just moved that further back. Inside of the camera, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm actually going to go ahead and go over into our Y scale of the transform. I'm going to have it 0.021, and the only animation I'm going to be doing with the camera is just moving it from right to left like so. We're going to use this for now as our base. Okay, so referring back to the original again, we can see that the writing here has quite a fair bit of parallax to it, and basically this just means that the text is small, but it is closer to the camera than the assets behind it. So we're going to go ahead and replicate that into our scene. So with our text that we made before, I'm actually going to go ahead and group these like so. And I'm going to go ahead and add an image plane and pipe that into our main timeline. As you can see, it appears here. I'm going to pull that down using the transform, making it a fair bit smaller, and then positioning that, I just zoom in over here to somewhere like this. So then when we go ahead and move our camera, we can see that the text here has parallax to it. So when moving it all the way over, we can then go ahead and tweak the position like so. I think something like this will do for now anyways. Okay, so referring back to the original here, we can see that there are these 3 lines that looks like they're evenly spread apart. There's one in the foreground, middle ground, and the background here. So we're going to go ahead and duplicate those into our own composition. Okay, so I went and added a polygon node here. Also remember to unselect the animation diamond when making your mask and sort of make this line here that's tapered off at the top and more so at the bottom. Then I went and added a paper edge like we did before with these settings here. And then I went and added a fast noise. So the same thing like we did before. With those other small lines, I went and did with this one here, and I used these settings. And then of course, I went ahead and added the background to it. If I just go ahead and show the alpha, you can see that the color has been added to that. So going ahead and adding an image plane, I'm actually going to go ahead and group these, hitting F2 to rename. So we can go ahead and we can keep organized. Then I'm just going to go ahead and add this into our comp. And as you can see, I already added our translations into our transform. And basically what that does is it brings it back here. Now we're going to use a duplicate 3D and just add this. We're going to have it at 3 duplications. And then we're going to go ahead and change the Z offset. So if I go ahead and view these lines here, it's a little hard to see in the viewfinder, but you can see them here in our comp. Go ahead and duplicate them so the middle line matches up with the center of our map here. It doesn't have to be 100%, but get it as close as you can. I'm gonna go ahead and bring that back ever so slightly. And there we go. Then once we go ahead and play with the camera, we can see that those lines have been added. Again, referring back to the original, as we play the video, you can see that there is the same technique used, but with these white lines. But of course, there's way more than the ones we used before. So inside our timeline here, just bring in a background node, make this white, and then pipe this in with a rectangle node. I'm gonna make this really small, and we're gonna go ahead and just move this over to the end. That will do for now. Again, same thing, add in your image plane. I already went and tweaked the translation, adding this into our comp, which is all the way over here. Again, add in a duplicate, and then for this duplicate, we're gonna make the copies 30, and then we're going to change the Y offset to 0.085. So then we get these lines like so. Going back into our rectangle here, I'm going to go ahead and tweak the values. And whilst I'm doing this, I'm going to go over into our render here actually and change this into hardware renderer, anti-aliasing, and then all the way down to 3, just because my system can handle hardware renderer. So once you've tweaked and you're happy with the way things are, we can go ahead and move on to adding the images of those ruined buildings and the flag in the beginning of our composition. Before we do that though, for organizational purposes, I'm going to go ahead and just group this huge map comp here, just for a little more space as well. So there we go, nice and neat. So inside of the assets folder, go ahead and pull in the 2 images of the ruined building. We're actually going to go ahead and work with this one first. Selecting this, typing in Lumic here, and then viewing our Lumic here. We want to remove the sky and just have the main body of our image here. So play around with the luminance value, the low and high, so that just the cloud is selected, and then just click invert. And then in the expand and contract, decrease that value. And then I'm going to go ahead and blur the edges ever so slightly. And then using the expand and contract here, I'm going to go ahead and increase the value like so. So it just gets rid of that harsh edge. All right, we're going to go ahead and just mask out this bit here because we want just the rubble here. We don't want the trees in this part of the building. We're going to use a polygon node and just go ahead and masking over that. Just a rough mask will do. It doesn't have to be clean at all. And then once that's done, we're going to go ahead and holding right click, dragging this onto the Lumic here and selecting the garbage matte, and then just reversing that. So we get just our image. We're going to go ahead and add an ellipse inside as well. And we're going to go ahead and invert this. I'm going to go ahead and stretch this out. And what I'm going to do is just soften the edge like so. I'm going to copy this, paste it, and then I'm just going to make this one smaller. Change this to subtract and deselecting invert here. And then I'm just going to add this bit of the soldier's foot here. All right, that looks pretty good to me. We're going to go ahead now and color it the same way as our map. So just going over and grabbing the 2 nodes that we made, closing this, and then going ahead and adding this like so. So then we get this, and of course we'll tweak this later, but this is good for now. We're going to do one last thing to this image is we're going to go ahead and add this back in our image like so. And we're going to go ahead and add in another ellipse, soften the edge, and decrease the level to quite a bit here. And just place this over here, and we should get something that looks like that. Okay, so with our second image here, all that we're going to do is just add an ellipse, soften the edge, and decrease the value by quite a lot. I think something like that looks good for now. Of course, we will tweak this as we add it into our comp. Again, I'm also going to go ahead and add this, and we're going to go ahead now and add this into our composition. Okay, so once everything is in place, I think we are right at the stage now where we can actually go ahead and start animating the camera. Going over into our camera here, we're going to start it off to be somewhere like here. So we're going to go ahead and place a keyframe on our x-axis here, and then going all the way to the end, and somewhere like here will do. I'm placing a keyframe there as well. So then when we play, we get this nice smooth linear movement. Okay, going all the way into the end of our comp here, we're going to do a little bit more compositing. I'm actually going to go ahead and make this a lot softer, so all the way to the end, and I'm going to bring this down like that. I'm actually going to go ahead and type in very blur and just add that into our comp. I'm going to go ahead and change this to soften, change this to 8, and I'm going to change the size to 9.06, like so. I'm going to go ahead now and add a matte, going over into solid color, making that gradient, and then from linear to radial. In Control G, I'm going to paste this dot to be in the middle, and then I'm going to bring this black point up quite a bit here, and instead of making this pure white, I'm going to make this gray. Something like that will do. And yeah, you can go ahead now and just play around with the amount of blur you want added to your corners. I think something like that will do for me. We're going to go ahead and add one last thing here and just add in an extra layer here. I'm going to add an image with this background. I'm actually going to go ahead and view our paper texture, and with the background here, zoom in and just select any point from this texture here. I'm going to go ahead and add an ellipse to that as well. Invert that, and then I'm just going to soft edge that by quite a bit. Okay, so when viewing everything that we've made so far, we get this nice and simple animation, which I think looks good so far. We're going to go ahead now and animate the plane that guides our eye from this side of the comp to this side over here, which then reveals our text here and our circles animate. Okay, so pulling in the plane from the assets folder here, just go ahead and mask out the image using an ellipse, or if you have the studio version, go ahead and use magic mask to do so. Okay, so I have studio, but I went ahead and just used the polygon node anyways. Again, using the brightness and contrast, we want to make something that looks similar to this, like so. Clicking and then adding in directional blur, adding that into our scene. Viewing the directional blur, I'm going to just go ahead and increase the length. Something like that will do. Okay, I'm going to go ahead now and merge this onto a background. And then after the directional blur, I'm going to go ahead and add a transform, scale that down quite a fair bit. We're going to go ahead now and group this. I'm going to go ahead and add a image plane here and add another image plane. Now this image plane is going to be used to create the shadow. We're going to go ahead and bring in a brightness and contrast as well as a blur, and then pipe this into the image plane. We're going to view our blur here. We're going to select the setting here, go ahead and decrease the gain like so, and then I'm actually just going to select alpha as well. Something like that will do. Then inside of the blur, I'm just going to increase the blur, viewing that blur as well by somewhere like that, and then I'm actually going to go ahead and decrease that, and we can play around with that later on as well. We're actually going to go ahead and merge this on top of each other, and then add in a transform and add that in, and then we're going to go ahead and pipe this into our composition. Viewing the transform here, I'm going to bring that down so it's inside of our image like so. And we're going to go ahead and make our shadow that appears by decreasing the Z length of our plane like so, having it just above our map here. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring the shadow down. So then when we use our transform, you can see here that we can animate both of them, and we also have that nice parallax here. That looks good for now. I'm going over into the first, going over into somewhere like here. I'm going to bring this up, and I'm going to go ahead and decrease the size. Something like that will do. I'm actually going to go ahead and bring this up as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and actually bring down the gain and increase the blur like so. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and animate it. So selecting our transform here and going over into the beginning. I think this is actually a little bit too far apart, so I'm going to bring this closer. Okay, so just as the 3 dots exit of our scene, we're going to start our animation here. So placing a keyframe on our X value and going over late into the animation should leave somewhere like here. So we can go ahead and drag our plane across until it exits our scene like so. Okay, with everything together, we get something that looks like this. Which is good, but as you can see, we don't need the plane to be just stagnant here and then stagnant here at the end. So we're going to keyframe the opacity. So going over into my polygon here, I'm going to place a keyframe just before on the level and then making that 0. So then when we go to the beginning, it's not in our clip. And then at the end here, after our animation is done, so somewhere along here, I'm going to go ahead and place that at 0 as well. Okay, playing it back, I've noticed that we forgot to separate this line here because this line actually has a fair bit of parallax inside of the original comp. So bringing our group over, we're just going to go ahead and isolate where the line is, which is here. We're going to go ahead and just copy this and then remove it from our comp, making more space here because I'm just going to add this underneath. I'm going to paste this. I'm going to go ahead and group this as well. And then I'm going to copy the image plane, paste it, and pipe this in. Viewing our comp here, I'm going to zoom in all the way and I'm just going to increase the scale like so. Okay, so then when we play our video, we can see that it has a slight bit of parallax to the line, which is what we wanted. Okay, so we're going to add more to our comp here. I'm actually going to go ahead and we're going to make the French flag that flies in the background. So going over into templates here, just deleting paper, type in flag, and then just drag that in. Viewing this is nothing because we need to pipe it in. So go ahead and bring a background like so, and we can already see our flag. And if we go ahead and play it, we can see that it's animated as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and view our flag in our second viewer and then view our background here. We're going to go ahead and add a rectangle to this and then bring this over to the side. I'm actually going to go ahead and increase the blue, and I'm actually going to make this lighter blue, maybe something like that. I'm going to deselect this, adding in another background, merging this onto the background, viewing the background and changing this to white. And then we're going to go ahead and copy this, paste this over, adding in a transform, pasting this in, viewing our transform, and then flipping this over and then changing this over into red. I'm just going to change the red to something like that will do. So then when we pipe this back into the flying, we get our flag here. Going over into our flying flag, going over into displacement here, or sorry, fast noise I mean, and just changing the Y scale here so it's a little bit straighter. So then when we view, we get this. Okay, we're going to go ahead and add in a brightness contrast, and then selecting the alpha, we're just going to bring down the gain. We're going to go ahead now and group these, and then we're going to go ahead and add in a image plane, pipe this into our main viewer, and then going ahead and positioning this back here, and I'm just going to increase the size a fair bit. Okay, so I went and copied and pasted this over from the original, but go ahead and place your flag where you want it to be. The only thing I did go ahead and change is I merged it on top of a background, added an ellipse here. If I just go ahead and view the alpha channel so you can see, and then I just went ahead and had these settings here. Okay, so now once we have that built out, inside of the folder, there are a bunch of cloud assets that I added in, and I'm going to show you how you can go ahead and use that. Now this part of the composition is completely up to you. Play around and see what looks nice to you. All I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to actually add them into the clip. So there are two ones with the blue sky here. Add in a lumic here, and just play around with the luminance values till you've gotten the sky removed from the clouds. And then you could go ahead and add an ellipse to the clouds. You could select which part of the clouds you need. And then once you're doing that, I'm just going to select all of them to show you. Go ahead now and just decrease the level of the ellipse here, and you go ahead and decrease the blend of them. So yeah, play around with whatever type of cloud you want to add in and do whatever feels the best to you. Okay, so once you've gone in and you've added your clouds where you want them to be, I'm going to show you a nice little extra step I took. I went and ungrouped our original map here, and I went and added these clouds in. And viewing the cloud, it kind of looks like with this blue here, a bit of the blue sky is appearing over on top of our clip. All I did was I went ahead and masked out the clouds that I wanted to be inside of that image here, positioned them where I wanted to be, went ahead and merged that, and then decreased the blend of the merge. And then on top of that, I went ahead and added just that regular blue sky here, then went ahead and masked it with these inputs like so, added a transform with an instance so I can move both of them around. And it sort of gives this negative space here where your eyes kind of fill in where the cloud should be. Okay, so just for organizational sake, I'm going to go ahead and group that again and just bring this over here. One last thing here is I did go ahead and tweak texture here. These are my final settings, so go ahead and just copy this. I also did go ahead and reduce the opacity of this here. We're going to go ahead and move on to the very last part of the comp, and then we can call it a day. So inside of your assets folder, we have this logo. Go ahead and use the same technique as before by adding a luma here and playing around with the luminance values to remove just the white of the image. So once you're happy, this looks good so far, we're going to add in a brightness and contrast, and I went and darkened the image by quite a bit. We're going to go ahead and add a transform because we're going to scale this up later on. And then we're going to go ahead and merge this on top of a background and set the alpha to 0. And then now we can scale this up. Okay, so bringing in a fast noise with these settings here. I'm going to go ahead and pipe this into the mask input, which gives us this image. Going ahead, I'm going to bring in another fast noise with these settings here. And I went ahead and set this to radial like so. We're going to go ahead and merge this on top. So then we get this nice texture here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and merge this on top of another background again. We're going to go ahead and select these and just group them like so. We're going to use the mask input of this now to then animate it appearing. So we're going to bring in another fast noise. Viewing the fast noise here, inside of the fast noise, we're going to go over into color, change this to gradient. I'm going to switch the sides here and make this black. Going over into fast noise, changing this from uni to radial, bringing in the center like so and decreasing the size. I'm going to increase the detail. So then when I pipe this into the mask input, I go ahead and increase and decrease the size here. You can see that it's affected by the middle. So I'm just going to go ahead and move this over into the right hand side here. Something like here will do. And then when we increase the size, we can see that it's being revealed. And again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to have this shown so I can actually see where it is, and then pipe this into an image plane. I'm going to move this along here and just pipe this in like so. Then viewing the media out and our 3D scene, I'm going to go ahead and place our logo here, the same level as our map, so it doesn't have a lot of parallax to it. And I'm just going to place it somewhere like there will do. I'm going to go ahead and refer to our original image. I'm just going to get a sense of where it is and just match that on with the same position. I think something like there is actually okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead now and play around with the fast noise mask until I get something that I'm happy with. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. I'm actually going to go ahead into the brightness and just dim that like so. And then now by viewing this, I'm just going to place the keyframes for where I want it to appear. So somewhere around here will do, and it will end somewhere around here. Okay, so I don't have to mess around with the last keyframe, but I do have to adjust the beginning of our first one. And I'm just going to have that scale all the way down. So then we get this nice clean reveal here. I think that should be fine. And then we have one last thing which I did go ahead and forget to mention, is our text animation. So opening up the group we made, I'm going to go over into this text here. The plane flies over the screen here. We're going to have the text appear, and we're going to do that with a rectangle node. We're going to go ahead and pipe this in like so. I'm going to make this shorter, and I'm going to increase the soft edge by quite a bit. So something like that will do. I'm going to have this over at the end here. And then once the plane flies over, so somewhere like there will do, we're going to animate the center. And there we go. You can go ahead and tweak this graph and play around with the positioning. And go ahead and tweak the graph, maybe have it appear here slightly. And it's just going to be a linear movement. There's one very last thing we're going to do, and then we can call this one a day. Is for the text that writes on, is we're going to composite this text here. And instead of it being pure black, we're going to make it red and darken it all the way. Something like that will do.